The surveyor's wagon rolled into Aurora, Colorado territory on a scorching July morning in 1876, carrying with it a woman who had no intention of falling in love ever again. Rebecca Katherine Winters stepped down from the dusty transport, her leather boots hitting the packed earth with a soft thud as she surveyed the sprawling frontier town before her. At 24 years old, she had already buried one husband back in Philadelphia, watched consumption steal him away in the winter of 1874, and decided that her future lay not in mourning black dresses and society teas, but in the precision of mathematics and the freedom of open land. She had apprenticed under her late father, a surveyor of some renown, and when the opportunity arose to work for the Territorial Land Office out west, she seized it with both hands, ignoring the scandalized gasps of her mother's friends. The main street of Aurora bustled with activity despite the heat. Miners fresh from the nearby gold fields mingled with ranchers, farmers, and merchants. The town had grown considerably since the silver strikes of the early 70s, transforming from a modest settlement into a thriving hub of commerce and ambition. Rebecca adjusted her wide-brimmed hat and reached back into the wagon for her surveying equipment, the brass instruments gleaming in the harsh sunlight. "Miss Winters." A portly man with impressive mutton chops approached, mopping his brow with a handkerchief. "I'm Harold Pendleton from the land office. We have been expecting you." Rebecca shook his offered hand firmly, noting his barely concealed surprise at her grip. "Mr. Pendleton, I trust the accommodations we discussed in our correspondence are suitable." Yes, of course. "We have secured you a room at the boarding house run by Mrs. Fletcher. Very respectable establishment." He cleared his throat awkwardly. "I must confess, Miss Winters, when your application arrived, we assumed you were a man. Rebecca can be a masculine name in some regions, and your qualifications were so impressive that we never questioned it. And now that you see I am not a man." Rebecca kept her voice level, but her gray eyes hardened slightly. Pendleton had the grace to look embarrassed. "Your credentials speak for themselves. We have nearly 40 property disputes pending, and the territorial governor himself has mandated that all ranch boundaries be properly surveyed and recorded. We need someone competent, regardless of their sex. However, I feel obliged to warn you that some of the ranchers may not take kindly to a woman telling them where their property lines lie. Then, they will have to take their complaints to the territorial court," Rebecca replied calmly. "My measurements are accurate to the inch, and I have the law on my side." Pendleton smiled despite himself. "I can see you will do just fine, Miss Winters. Come, let me show you to your lodgings, and then we will review the pending cases. There is one in particular that requires immediate attention. 2 neighboring ranches, both claiming the same water rights. It has nearly come to violence on several occasions." As they walked through the dusty streets, Rebecca observed everything with a surveyor's eye, noting the layout of the town, the quality of construction, the way businesses clustered near the main thoroughfare. Children ran barefoot between buildings, and somewhere a piano played badly in one of the numerous saloons. This was a young town, full of ambition and rough edges, so different from the refined society she had left behind. Here, she thought, she could make a name for herself based on skill rather than her ability to pour tea and make polite conversation. The boarding house was a 2-story structure with fresh white paint and green shutters. Mrs. Fletcher, a sturdy woman with kind eyes and graying hair, welcomed Rebecca warmly and showed her to a small but clean room on the 2nd floor. The window overlooked the street, providing a view of the mountains in the distance, their peaks still crowned with snow despite the summer heat. After settling her belongings, Rebecca returned to the land office where Pendleton spread several maps across a large table. His finger traced a boundary line between two properties northwest of town: the Reeves Ranch and the Patterson spread. Both families have been in the territory for nearly 15 years, and they have always operated on gentlemen's agreements regarding their boundaries. However, the recent drought has made water scarce, and there is a spring-fed creek that both claim runs primarily through their land. "And the original land patents?" Rebecca asked, leaning over the map. "Vague at best. The surveyor who did the original work was notoriously unreliable, and he died in a mining accident in '69. We need accurate measurements and clear boundary markers that will hold up in court if necessary." Rebecca studied the map carefully, making notes in her leather-bound journal. "I will need to visit both properties and conduct a thorough survey. This will take several days, possibly more than a week depending on the terrain and weather. The Reeves Ranch is the larger of the two operations. The owner is Russell Xavier Reeves, runs about 2,000 head of cattle. He is a fair man by reputation, but he has a lot invested in that water access. The Patterson place is smaller, more focused on horse breeding. I will send word to both ranches that you will be arriving to conduct the official survey." The next morning, Rebecca loaded her equipment onto a rented horse and small pack mule, checked her compass and measuring chains one final time, and set out northwest toward the disputed properties. The ride took most of the morning, following a well-worn trail that cut through grassland and stands of pine. The landscape was breathtaking in its vastness, so different from the crowded eastern cities. Here, the sky seemed to stretch forever, an endless blue dome interrupted only by the distant mountains. She reached the boundary marker mentioned in the old survey notes around midday, though calling it a marker was generous. It was merely a pile of stones that could have been assembled by anyone for any purpose. Rebecca dismounted, tethered her animals, and began the meticulous work of taking measurements and consulting her instruments. The sun beat down mercilessly, but she was accustomed to working in all weather. Her late husband had often joked that she was more comfortable with a theodolite than a teacup, and he had not been wrong. She was so absorbed in her calculations that she did not hear the horse approaching until its shadow fell across her notebook. Rebecca looked up to find a man astride a large buckskin gelding, watching her with an expression somewhere between curiosity and confusion. He was tall, with broad shoulders and sun-bronzed skin, his dark hair slightly too long beneath a worn Stetson. His eyes were a striking shade of blue, startling against his tanned face, and there was a quiet competence in the way he sat his horse that spoke of years in the saddle. "You must be the surveyor from the land office," he said, his voice a deep baritone with the slight drawl of someone who had spent most of his life outdoors. "I am, Rebecca Winters." She stood, brushing dust from her split riding skirt. "And you are Mr. Reeves, I presume?" "Russell Reeves, yes." He dismounted with easy grace and removed his hat, revealing a distinct tan line across his forehead. "Folks mostly call me Russ. I got word from Pendleton that someone was coming to sort out this boundary situation. I expected someone different." "A man, you mean," Rebecca said dryly. A hint of amusement flickered in those blue eyes. "Well, yes, but I was also expecting someone older and probably meaner. Land disputes bring out the worst in people, and I figured they would send someone who could handle themselves in a fight if necessary. I handle myself with accuracy and legal documentation, Mr. Reeves. I have found that measurements do not care about the sex of the person taking them." She turned back to her instruments, making a note in her journal. "I have been hired to establish the precise boundary between your property and the Patterson Ranch, with particular attention to water rights along the disputed creek." Russell Reeves studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Fair enough. I have always believed in doing things proper, which is why I agreed to this survey in the first place. Patterson thinks that creek runs mostly through his land, but I know for a fact that the original boundary was set at the old lightning-struck pine, which would put the spring and most of the creek on my side. "And where is this lightning-struck pine now?" Rebecca asked, making another notation. "That is part of the problem. It fell during a windstorm 3 years ago and got cut up for firewood during the hard winter of '74. All that is left is the stump, and even that is mostly rotted away." Rebecca sighed. This was going to be more complicated than she had hoped. "I will need to examine all the original survey notes, such as they are, and then conduct a complete survey of the disputed area. It would be helpful if you could point out all the landmarks mentioned in the original claim." "I can do that. I know every inch of this land. Came here with my father in '61, back when this was all open range and the Utes still hunted here freely." Russell gestured toward the west. "Built our first cabin with timber we cut ourselves, survived the hard winters and the Indian scares, fought off claim jumpers and rustlers. This ranch is more than just property to me, Miss Winters. It is my life's work." There was something in his voice, a depth of feeling that made Rebecca look at him more carefully. She saw not just a cowboy but a man who understood the value of the land in a way that transcended mere ownership. It was how her father had spoken about his work, with reverence and respect for the earth itself. "I understand, Mr. Reeves. That is precisely why accurate boundaries matter, so that the work you have put into this land is protected legally and fairly." She paused, then added, "I will need to camp somewhere nearby while I conduct the survey. It will take several days, and riding back to Aurora each evening would be impractical." Russell considered this, then nodded. "You can set up camp near the ranch house. My sister and her husband live with me, so it would be proper enough. We have got a guest cabin that mostly gets used during roundup when we bring in extra hands. Nothing fancy, but it has got a roof and a stove." Rebecca had been prepared to sleep in a tent, so a cabin sounded like luxury. "That would be acceptable, thank you. Come on then, it is another hour's ride to the main house. We can start the survey proper tomorrow at first light." Russell mounted his buckskin and waited while Rebecca packed up her equipment and climbed onto her own horse. They rode in comfortable silence for a time, following a track that wound through stands of pine and across open meadow. The grassland was brown from the drought Russell had mentioned, but Rebecca could imagine how beautiful it must be in wetter years, green and lush and dotted with wildflowers. Cattle grazed in the distance, red and white shapes against the golden grass. "How did you come to be a surveyor?" Russell asked eventually, his voice curious rather than challenging. "It is not a common profession for a woman. My father was a surveyor in Pennsylvania. I grew up watching him work, and I found I had an aptitude for the mathematics involved. After he died, I continued my apprenticeship with his former partner." She kept her voice matter of fact, not mentioning her brief marriage. That was her own business. "When the opportunity arose to work in the territories, I took it. The West is supposed to be a place where people can reinvent themselves, is it not?" "That it is," Russell agreed. "I have seen former soldiers become ranchers, shopkeepers become miners, all manner of transformations. The land does not care who you were back east, only what you are willing to make of yourself here." He glanced at her. "Still, surveying is hard work. Long days in the sun, difficult terrain, and like I mentioned, sometimes people do not appreciate being told their assumptions about their property are wrong. I have faced skepticism before, Mr. Reeves. I am still here." Something that might have been approval crossed his weathered face. I imagine you are tougher than you look, Miss Winters. The Reeves Ranch was impressive in its scope and organization. The main house was a sprawling structure built of logs and stone, clearly expanded over the years as prosperity grew. Several outbuildings included a large barn, a bunkhouse for ranch hands, corrals, and various storage sheds. A vegetable garden flourished near the house, someone clearly tending it carefully despite the dry conditions. Chickens pecked in a fenced yard, and a pair of dogs bounded up to greet them as they rode in. A woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps a few years older than Rebecca, with Russell's same dark hair and a warm, open face. "Russ, I see you found our surveyor. Come in, you must be parched from riding in this heat. Miss Winters, this is my sister, Caroline Mitchell. Caroline, Rebecca Winters from the Territorial Land Office." Caroline's handshake was firm and her smile genuine. "Welcome to our home, Miss Winters. It is about time we got this boundary situation settled proper. The tension with the Pattersons has been trying on everyone. My husband Thomas is out checking the water levels at the creek, but he will be back for supper. You will join us, of course." Rebecca found herself liking Caroline immediately. There was no judgment in her eyes, only friendly curiosity and hospitality. "Thank you. I would be grateful for a meal, and please call me Rebecca. Then you must call me Caroline. Let me show you to the guest cabin so you can settle your things, and then we will have some lemonade on the porch. Lord knows it is too hot to do much else in the middle of the day." The cabin was small but well maintained, with a narrow bed, a small table and chairs, and a pot-bellied stove in one corner. A window looked out toward the mountains, and someone had left a pitcher of water and a basin for washing. Rebecca unpacked her surveying equipment carefully, storing it in a corner where it would be safe, then splashed water on her face and neck, grateful for the coolness. When she joined Caroline and Russell on the porch, the lemonade was tart and refreshing, the ice in it a luxury that spoke to the ranch's prosperity. An ice house was no small investment this far from major cities. "So you will be here for several days conducting the survey?" Caroline asked, settling into a rocking chair with her own glass. "At least a week, possibly more depending on what I find. I need to establish the original boundary markers referenced in the land patent, take accurate measurements of the entire disputed area, and map the water sources." Rebecca sipped her lemonade. "The more information I have, the clearer the legal boundaries will be." Russell leaned against the porch railing, his eyes on the distant mountains. "I want to be fair to Patterson. We have been neighbors for 15 years, and for most of that time we got along fine. But water is life out here, especially in a drought year. I cannot afford to lose access to that spring, and neither can he. We need to know definitively where the boundary lies." "Has there been trouble between you?" Rebecca asked carefully. "Words mostly, though it came close to more last month when one of his hands accused my men of moving cattle onto Patterson land deliberately. It was not true. Cattle wander, especially when they are looking for water, but tempers are short when everyone is worried about their herds." Russell's jaw tightened. "I will not let it come to violence. That is why I insisted on bringing in an official surveyor, even if Patterson grumbled about the cost." "He is paying half the survey fee?" Rebecca asked. "He is, though he was not happy about it. Pendleton made it clear that if he refused, the territorial government would do it anyway and charge him the full cost, so he agreed." Russell turned to look at her. "You should know that Patterson is not a bad man, just a stubborn one. He has got it fixed in his mind that his property extends to a certain rock formation near the creek, and he will not be pleased if the survey shows different. Then he will have to accept what the survey reveals," Rebecca said firmly. I do not adjust my findings to please either party, Mr. Reeves. I measure what is there and compare it to the legal descriptions in the land patents. The truth is the truth, whether it is convenient or not." Caroline laughed softly. "Oh, I like her, Russ. She does not mince words." "I noticed," Russell said, and there was something in his tone that made Rebecca look at him more closely. He was watching her with an expression she could not quite read, something thoughtful and assessing. The afternoon passed pleasantly. Caroline was easy to talk to, asking about Rebecca's journey west and her impressions of Aurora without being intrusive. Thomas Mitchell arrived as the sun was lowering toward the mountains, a stocky man with a weathered face and a quiet demeanor. He shook Rebecca's hand and offered a simple welcome before disappearing to wash up for supper. The evening meal was hearty and delicious, beef and potatoes and fresh bread with butter from Caroline's churn. The conversation flowed easily, and Rebecca found herself relaxing in a way she had not expected. These were good people, hardworking and honest, and they treated her with respect rather than skepticism. After dinner, Russell offered to show Rebecca the area where the disputed boundary ran. They walked out beyond the corrals as the long summer twilight painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. The air was finally cooling, a relief after the brutal heat of the day. "The creek runs through that valley," Russell said, pointing to a depression in the land perhaps half a mile distant. "You can see the cottonwoods that grow along it. The spring that feeds it is maybe another mile beyond, up in those rocks. That spring has never gone dry, not even in the worst drought years. It is why this land is so valuable." Rebecca studied the terrain, already planning her survey route in her mind. "And where does Patterson claim his boundary lies?" "He says it runs along the far side of the creek, which would give him control of the spring and most of the water." "I say it runs along the near side, based on the original survey markers." Russell's voice was calm, but she could hear the tension beneath it. "Whoever is right gets the water. The other gets a fight for survival every time we have a dry year." "Then we will establish who is right," Rebecca said simply. "Tomorrow I will start at the original survey point mentioned in the land patents and work from there. It will take time, but it will be accurate." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the last light fade from the sky. The first stars were appearing, brilliant against the darkening blue. "Can I ask you something?" Russell said quietly. "Of course. Why did you really come west?" "A woman with your education and skills, you could have worked in Philadelphia or New York. You did not have to come to the middle of nowhere to prove yourself." Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, considering how much to reveal. "I was married," she said finally. "My husband died 2 years ago. Consumption. I nursed him through the final months, and when it was over, I found I could not bear to stay in that house, in that city, surrounded by memories and pity. My mother wanted me to remarry, to find another suitable man and settle back into society, but I did not want suitable. I wanted purpose. I wanted to do work that mattered, to use the skills my father taught me. So when I saw the advertisement for territorial surveyors, I applied, and here I am." Russell was quiet for a long moment. "I am sorry for your loss. That must have been difficult." "It was. But it also taught me that life is too short to live it according to someone else's expectations. My husband used to say I was happiest when I was working, solving problems with precision and logic. He was right. So I decided to build a life around that truth rather than fighting it." "He sounds like he was a good man." "He was, and he would have liked you, I think. He always respected people who worked hard and dealt honestly." Rebecca turned to face Russell. "Thank you for being willing to accept an impartial survey, even if it might go against your interests. That takes integrity." Russell met her eyes, and in the fading light she saw something shift in his expression. "I learned a long time ago that you cannot build anything lasting on a foundation of lies or half-truths. If the boundary goes where Patterson says it does, then I will have to find another solution for my water needs. I will not like it, but I will accept it. The land does not care about what I want. It just is what it is." They walked back to the ranch house together, and Rebecca found herself acutely aware of his presence beside her. The easy way he moved, the competence in every gesture. She had not expected to like Russell Reeves, and she certainly had not expected to find herself thinking about him after she retired to the guest cabin for the night. But as she lay in the narrow bed, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling for the evening, she could not stop replaying their conversations in her mind. "This is foolish," she told herself firmly. "You are here to do a job, not to develop feelings for a client." She had built her new life on professionalism and competence. She would not compromise that for a pair of blue eyes and a deep voice. But sleep was a long time coming nonetheless. The next morning, Rebecca was up before dawn, eager to begin the survey work. She ate a quick breakfast of bread and coffee that Caroline had left out for her, then gathered her equipment and headed toward the original survey marker Russell had shown her on the map. The morning air was cool and fresh, the sun just beginning to paint the eastern sky with light. Russell found her 2 hours later, already deep into her measurements. He had brought water and some wrapped biscuits. "Caroline thought you might need these. She said you left before proper breakfast." "I wanted to start while the light was good," Rebecca said, accepting the water gratefully. She had been so focused on her work that she had not noticed how thirsty she was. "Thank you." Russell dismounted and watched her work for a few minutes. "What exactly are you measuring?" Rebecca explained the process, showing him how she used the theodolite to measure angles and the measuring chain to calculate distances. "I am establishing a baseline from known reference points, then triangulating to determine the exact locations of the boundary markers mentioned in the original survey. Once I have those plotted accurately, I can determine where the legal boundary actually lies." "How accurate can you be?" "To within a few inches if the conditions are right. It requires patience and attention to detail, but the mathematics do not lie." Russell seemed genuinely interested, asking intelligent questions about the process. Rebecca found herself enjoying the explanation, sharing her knowledge with someone who actually wanted to understand rather than simply accepting or dismissing it out of hand. "My father used to say that surveying was about making the invisible visible," she said, squinting through the theodolite's eyepiece to take a reading. "The boundaries exist legally on paper, but someone has to go out and find them in the real world, make them concrete and measurable. It is like being a detective, following clues left by previous surveyors and nature itself." "I never thought of it that way, but it makes sense." Russell shaded his eyes to look toward the disputed creek. "Will you need help carrying equipment to the spring?" "That would actually be very helpful. The terrain gets rougher up there from what I could see on the map, and some of my instruments are heavy and delicate." They worked together throughout the morning, Russell proving to be a capable assistant. He was strong enough to carry the heavier equipment without complaint, and careful enough not to disturb her measurements. More importantly, he seemed to understand when she needed silence to concentrate, and when she welcomed conversation. Around midday, they reached the spring that fed the disputed creek. It bubbled up from between a formation of rocks, creating a small pool before flowing down into the valley. Even in the drought, the water ran clear and cool. Rebecca could understand immediately why both ranchers valued it so highly. This was life itself in this arid land. "Beautiful, is it not?" Russell said softly. I used to come here as a boy back when my father was first building the ranch. It felt like a sacred place, untouched and pure. Rebecca was taking measurements, but she paused to look around. He was right. There was something special about this spot, something that transcended property disputes and legal boundaries. It is extraordinary. She spent the next several hours mapping the spring and the creek's path down through the valley, taking careful measurements at regular intervals. Russell stayed with her, helping without being asked, seeming to anticipate what she would need next. They fell into an easy rhythm, working together with the comfort of people who understood each other instinctively. As the afternoon shadows lengthened, Rebecca sat down on a sun-warmed rock to review her notes and calculations. Russell handed her water, then sat nearby, not crowding her but not leaving either. "You love this work," he observed. It was not a question. "I do," Rebecca admitted. "There is something deeply satisfying about taking chaos and confusion and bringing order to it. About making things clear and definite when they were vague before. I think I understand that. Ranching is different work, but there is a similar satisfaction in taking raw land and making it productive, in building something that will last." Russell was quiet for a moment. "Can I ask you something else? You seem to be making a habit of that," Rebecca said, but she was smiling. "You ever get lonely doing this work, traveling from place to place, always being the outsider?" The question caught her off guard with its insight. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But I was lonely in Philadelphia too after my husband died. At least here, my loneliness serves a purpose. I am building something, even if it is just a reputation for accurate work. That seems like a hard way to live. Perhaps, but it is honest. I would rather be lonely and true to myself than surrounded by people and pretending to be someone I am not." Rebecca looked at him directly. "Do you get lonely, Mr. Reeves, living out here doing the same work day after day?" "Sometimes," he echoed her words. "I've got Caroline and Thomas and the ranch hands during busy seasons. But it is not the same as having someone who is truly yours, someone to build a life with rather than just working beside." He paused. "I was engaged once, back in '68. She was the daughter of a merchant in Denver. But when she came out to see the ranch, to see what her life would be like, she realized she could not do it. Too isolated, too hard, too different from what she had imagined. She went back to Denver and married a banker. I am sorry, that must have hurt. It did at the time. But looking back, I am grateful she was honest about it before we married. Better a broken engagement than a broken marriage." Russell's eyes were on the distant mountains. "I always told myself I would wait for someone who understood what this life meant, who could love the land the way I do. But women like that do not exactly grow on trees out here." Rebecca felt her heart beat a little faster. Was he saying what she thought he was saying? "Perhaps you have been looking for the wrong things. Maybe what you need is not someone who already loves the land, but someone who could learn to love it, given the right reasons." Russell turned to look at her, and the intensity in his blue eyes made her breath catch. "And what would be the right reasons, Miss Winters?" The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Rebecca knew she should deflect, should keep things professional. But something in her, some part that had been locked away since her husband's death, wanted to reach toward this man, toward the honest emotion she saw in his face. "I suppose," she said carefully, "the right reason would be finding someone worth loving, someone who made the land seem less lonely and the work more meaningful." "Rebecca," Russell said, and it was the first time he had used her given name. "I know I have only known you for 2 days. And I know you came here to do a job, not to listen to a cowboy talk about feelings. But I would be lying if I said I had not noticed you, had not found myself thinking that you are exactly the kind of person I have been waiting for." Someone smart and brave and true, someone who understands the value of honest work and clear boundaries. Rebecca's heart was racing now, but she forced herself to think clearly. "Mr. Reeves, Russell, I am flattered, truly, but I need to maintain my professional objectivity. I am here to survey your land, and I cannot let personal feelings compromise that work. I would never ask you to compromise your work. If the survey shows the boundary goes where Patterson claims, then that is what it shows. My feelings for you have got nothing to do with where the creek runs." He stood up, clearly trying to give her space. "I am sorry if I have made you uncomfortable. That was not my intention. I just believe in being honest about what I feel." "No, you have not made me uncomfortable," Rebecca said quickly. "If anything, I appreciate your honesty. It is just that I am not sure what to do with it. I came west to focus on my career, not to get tangled up in romance again. I understand, and I will not press you about it. But I wanted you to know how I felt, because I think you feel something too, and I did not want either of us to spend the next week pretending we do not." Russell picked up one of the equipment cases. "Come on, we should head back before Caroline starts worrying and sends out a search party." They rode back to the ranch in silence, but it was not uncomfortable. If anything, Rebecca felt a strange sense of relief that everything was out in the open. Russell was right. She did feel something, a pull toward him that went beyond simple attraction. There was a quality to him, a steadiness and integrity that called to something deep inside her. But she had responsibilities, a career she was trying to build. Could she really afford to let herself fall for a rancher in the middle of a professional assignment? What would it do to her reputation if word got out that she had become romantically involved with a client? Over the next several days, Rebecca threw herself into the survey work with almost desperate focus. She spent long hours in the field, taking measurements and making calculations, double-checking everything to ensure absolute accuracy. Russell gave her space, though he was always available if she needed help carrying equipment or navigating difficult terrain. Caroline watched both of them with knowing eyes but said nothing, simply making sure Rebecca was fed and comfortable. The survey was revealing fascinating information. The original surveyor had indeed been sloppy with his measurements, and several of the boundary markers were significantly off from where they should have been according to the legal descriptions. Rebecca traced the discrepancies carefully, documenting everything in her detailed notes. On the 5th day of the survey, she rode over to the Patterson ranch to take measurements from their side of the disputed boundary. Owen Patterson was a lean, weathered man in his 50s with suspicious eyes and a curt manner. He watched Rebecca work with barely concealed skepticism. "I still say this is a waste of time and money," he said, spitting tobacco juice into the dust. "I know where my property line runs, been ranching this land for 15 years. Then the survey will confirm your knowledge," Rebecca replied calmly, not looking up from her calculations. "And it will be legally binding, which will prevent any future disputes." Future disputes. That is a fancy way of saying Reeves wants to steal my water. Mr. Reeves wants the same thing you do, Mr. Patterson. A clear legal boundary so there is no confusion about water rights. He has been nothing but cooperative during this entire process." Patterson snorted. "That is because he figures you will side with him. Pretty young woman like you, spending all that time at his ranch. I am sure he has been very charming." Rebecca set down her measuring chain and stood up to face Patterson directly. Her voice was cold. "I am a professional surveyor employed by the territorial government, Mr. Patterson. My measurements are based on mathematics and the legal land descriptions, not on anyone's charm. If you are questioning my integrity, I suggest you take it up with the land office in Aurora. Otherwise, kindly let me do my work." Patterson had the grace to look slightly ashamed. "Meant no disrespect, miss. Just worried about my water, that is all. I understand your concern. Water is precious, especially in drought years. But that is precisely why we need accurate boundaries, so everyone knows what they legally control." Rebecca softened her tone slightly. "I will present my findings to both you and Mr. Reeves at the same time, and they will be documented with the Territorial Land Office. Whatever the survey shows, it will be fair and accurate." She worked on the Patterson Ranch for 2 more days, taking measurements and comparing them to her findings from the Reeves side. The picture that was emerging was not what either rancher had expected, and Rebecca knew her final report was going to surprise both of them. On the evening of the 7th day, she returned to the Reeves ranch with her survey complete. She had spent the afternoon going over all her calculations one final time, making sure everything was absolutely correct. Now she just needed to prepare her formal report and present the findings. Russell was waiting on the porch when she rode in, his face anxious. "Well, what did you find?" "I need to prepare my formal report first," Rebecca said, dismounting. "But I will tell you this. The original survey was even worse than I expected. The boundaries are not where either you or Patterson thought they were." "Meaning what, exactly?" "Meaning that tomorrow I will present my findings to both of you together, as is proper. I will not give either party advance knowledge that could bias the discussion." Rebecca met his eyes. "I know that is not what you want to hear, but it is how this has to be done." Russell nodded slowly. "You are right, of course. It is just difficult waiting." "I know, but it will be worth it to have clarity finally." Rebecca hesitated, then added, "For what it is worth, I think my findings will be acceptable to both parties if everyone can be reasonable." That evening at dinner, the tension was palpable. Caroline tried to keep the conversation light, but both Russell and Thomas were clearly worried about what the survey would reveal. Rebecca excused herself early, claiming she needed to work on her report, which was true but also provided an escape from the uncomfortable atmosphere. She worked late into the night by lamplight in the guest cabin, preparing a detailed report with maps and diagrams showing exactly where the legal boundary lay. Her hand cramped from writing, but she pressed on, determined to have everything ready for tomorrow's meeting. Around midnight, there was a soft knock on her cabin door. Rebecca opened it to find Russell standing there, hat in hand, looking uncertain. "I am sorry to bother you so late. I saw your lamp was still burning and thought you might need more oil or something." He glanced past her at the papers spread across the small table. "You have been working this whole time. The report needs to be thorough and clear. Tomorrow will be difficult enough without ambiguity in the documentation." Rebecca stepped aside. "Do you want to come in?" "I could use a break, actually." Russell entered, closing the door behind him. The cabin suddenly felt much smaller with his presence filling it. He looked at her papers without touching them. "I trust your work, Rebecca. Whatever you found, I know it will be fair and accurate." "That means more to me than you know." Rebecca sat down at the table, suddenly feeling the weight of the past week's work. "This has been one of the most challenging surveys I have ever done. Not because of the terrain or the measurements, but because I know how much rides on the results for both you and Patterson." Russell pulled out the other chair and sat down. "Can I tell you something? And I want you to hear it before you present your findings tomorrow, so you know it is not influenced by the results." Rebecca looked at him warily. "All right. These past 10 days, getting to know you, watching you work, talking with you, it has meant something to me, more than I expected. You are everything I admired from a distance and more up close. Smart and determined and uncompromising in your integrity. And I know the timing is terrible, and I know you are trying to build a career, but I would be a coward if I did not tell you that I have come to care for you deeply." Rebecca's breath caught. "Russell, let me finish, please. I'm not asking you to give up your career or change your plans. I know how much your work means to you, and I respect that. But I am asking if you would consider staying in this area after the survey is done, making Aurora your base of operations. There is plenty of surveying work in the territory, and this is as good a place as any to build your reputation." He paused, his blue eyes serious. "And it would give us a chance to see if this feeling between us is real and lasting, or just the result of working closely together for a few days." "You are asking me to stay," Rebecca said slowly, "but not asking me to give up my work. To see if we might build something together without sacrificing who we are individually." "Yes, exactly that." Rebecca stood and walked to the window, looking out at the star-filled sky. Her mind was racing, weighing possibilities and consequences. She had been so certain that her future lay in solitary work, in building a career that depended on no one but herself. But here was a man offering her something different: partnership without possession, respect without restriction. "I am afraid," she admitted quietly. "I was married before, and when my husband died, it nearly destroyed me. I built walls around my heart to protect myself from ever feeling that vulnerable again. And now, you are asking me to take those walls down, to risk being hurt again." Russell came to stand behind her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him but not touching. "I am afraid too. I have lived my whole adult life without letting anyone get too close, telling myself the ranch was enough. But it is not, Rebecca. It is a life, but not a full one. And I think you know what I mean, because you have been living the same way, using work as a shield against connection." She turned to face him, and the look in his eyes made her heart ache. "What if your survey results go against me tomorrow? What if Patterson was right all along and I lose access to that spring? Then we will find another solution. Drill a well, negotiate with Patterson for water rights, something. The water matters, but you matter more." Russell reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand gently. "I am not saying this to influence your report, Rebecca. I am saying it because if I do not tell you now, I might lose my chance forever." Rebecca looked down at their joined hands, his roughened by years of ranch work, her stained with ink from preparing reports. They were so different, and yet somehow they fit. She thought about her husband, about how he had encouraged her work even when society disapproved, how he had loved her for who she truly was rather than who he wanted her to be. He would not want her to hide behind grief forever. He would want her to live fully, to open her heart again if she found someone worthy. "I care for you too," she said quietly. "More than is probably wise, given the circumstances. And you are right that using work as a shield against connection is lonely, even if it feels safe. I just do not know if I am brave enough to risk my heart again." "Then we will be brave together," Russell said. "Small steps, no rushing, just seeing where this leads us, and always with honesty between us, even when it is hard." Rebecca looked up at him, at the sincerity in his face, and felt something inside her shift and settle. "All right. I will stay in the area after the survey is complete. We will see what happens between us, while I build my career and you run your ranch. But Russell, you need to know that I will not compromise my professional standards. Tomorrow I will present the results of my survey exactly as I found them, regardless of how they affect you personally." "I would not want it any other way," Russell said, and she believed him absolutely. He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, a gesture so old-fashioned and sweet that it made her eyes sting with unexpected tears. Then he left, closing the cabin door softly behind him, leaving Rebecca to finish her report with a heart that felt simultaneously lighter and more terrified than it had in years. The next morning dawned clear and hot. Rebecca dressed carefully in her most professional attire, gathered her completed report and maps, and rode with Russell into Aurora, where the meeting would be held at the land office. Owen Patterson was already there when they arrived, pacing the wooden sidewalk nervously. Harold Pendleton ushered them all into his office, where chairs had been arranged in a semicircle facing a large table. Rebecca spread her maps and documents across the table, acutely aware of the tension in the room. Both ranchers sat stiffly, not looking at each other. Pendleton hovered nearby, clearly anxious about potential conflict. "Gentlemen," Rebecca began, her voice calm and professional, "I have completed my survey of the disputed boundary between the Reeves and Patterson properties. My findings are based on careful measurements compared to the legal descriptions in your original land patents. What I discovered is that the original survey, conducted in 1862, was significantly flawed." She pointed to her detailed map. "The surveyor at that time appears to have used a magnetic compass without accounting for local magnetic variation, and he took insufficient measurements to properly triangulate his positions. As a result, the boundary markers he placed were off by as much as 200 yards in some locations." Patterson leaned forward. 200 yards, that is a significant error." "It is indeed. Now, using proper surveying techniques and more accurate instruments, I have established where the legal boundary actually lies based on the descriptions in your land patents." Rebecca traced a line on her map with her finger. "The boundary runs along this ridge line, then follows the natural watershed divide down to this point here, where it meets the creek." Russell studied the map intently. "That is not where I thought it was." "Nor where I claimed it was," Patterson admitted grudgingly. "No," Rebecca agreed. "The true boundary runs between both of your assumptions. Mr. Reeves, the spring itself is indeed on your property, as is roughly 60% of the creek's length before it leaves your land. However, Mr. Patterson, the creek then runs through your property for a considerable distance, and you have riparian rights to the water while it is within your boundaries." Pendleton looked confused. "So who controls the water?" "Both of them in different sections." "But here is the critical finding. The spring produces more than enough water for both ranches, even in drought years, as long as neither party dams or significantly diverts the natural flow." Rebecca pulled out another document. "I have researched territorial water law, and in cases of shared waterways, neither party can act in a way that materially harms the other's access to water. Mr. Reeves, you control the source, but you must allow the natural flow to continue to Mr. Patterson's land. Mr. Patterson, you have rights to the water as it passes through your property, but you cannot dam it or divert it in a way that would prevent it reaching the downstream portions of Mr. Reeves' land." The two ranchers looked at each other, then back at the map. Slowly, understanding dawned on both faces. "So we both get water," Russell said slowly. "Neither of us has exclusive control, but both of us have legal access." "Precisely. The original conflict arose because both of you thought it was all or nothing. In reality, the legal boundary creates a shared resource that benefits both ranches." Rebecca pointed to her calculations. "I have measured the flow rate of the spring, and even accounting for seasonal variation and drought conditions, there is sufficient water for the livestock numbers you currently run on both properties." Patterson sat back in his chair, looking stunned. "I spent 15 years thinking Reeves was trying to steal my water, when all along there was enough for both of us. And I spent the same time thinking you were encroaching on my land to access water that belonged to me," Russell added. He shook his head slowly. We could have resolved this years ago if someone had just measured properly in the first place. That is why accurate surveying matters, Rebecca said quietly. Property disputes often arise from faulty information rather than actual conflicts of interest. Once everyone knows the true facts, reasonable solutions usually become apparent. Pendleton was beaming. Miss Winters, this is excellent work. You have not only resolved the boundary dispute but found a solution that satisfies both parties. The territorial governor will be very pleased. I just did what I was hired to do, Rebecca replied, though she felt a warm glow of professional satisfaction. I will file the official maps and boundary descriptions with the land office, and both Mr. Reeves and Mr. Patterson will receive certified copies for their records. I recommend that we place permanent boundary markers at the key points I have identified to prevent any future confusion. Agreed, Russell said immediately. Agreed, Patterson echoed. He stood and extended his hand to Russell. I owe you an apology, Reeves. I said some harsh things over the years, accused you of trying to cheat me. I was wrong. Russell shook his hand firmly. And I was not always charitable in my thoughts about you either. Let us call it even and start fresh. We are neighbors and we should act like it. The meeting concluded with both ranchers in much better spirits than they had arrived. Pendleton could barely contain his satisfaction with how things had turned out. As they filed out of the office, he pulled Rebecca aside. Miss Winters, I have received inquiries from 3 other ranchers about property surveys. Your work here has impressed people. If you are interested, I can provide you with enough surveying work in this territory to keep you busy for the next 2 years at least. Rebecca felt a surge of triumph. This was what she had come west for, the opportunity to build a career based on skill and reputation. I am very interested, Mr. Pendleton. I would like to establish Aurora as my base of operations. I will need to return to Denver briefly to settle some business matters, but then I plan to return here permanently. Excellent. I will draw up the paperwork. The territorial government will be pleased to have a reliable surveyor in the region. Pendleton shook her hand enthusiastically. You have a real future here, Miss Winters. Outside, Russell was waiting by the horses. His expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes were hopeful. So you meant what you said last night, about staying in the area? I did. Pendleton just offered me enough work to keep me busy for years. Rebecca smiled. It seems Aurora suits me, professionally speaking. And personally speaking, Russell asked quietly. Personally speaking, I think I would like to see where this leads, with you, if you are still interested after everything. Russell's face broke into a grin that transformed him from handsome to breathtaking. Rebecca Winters, I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I am interested, more than interested. I want to court you properly, spend time getting to know you and see if we can build something real together. Then we will do exactly that, Rebecca said, and felt her own smile matching his. Though I should warn you, I am not going to change who I am. I will still be working long hours, taking surveys, being professional and precise. And I will still be running a ranch, dealing with cattle and drought and all the complications of this life. But we will figure it out together. Russell offered his arm. Can I buy you lunch, Miss Winters? I know a decent restaurant in town, and I think we have got a lot to talk about. I would like that very much, Mr. Reeves. They walked down the main street of Aurora together, and Rebecca felt something she had not experienced in years. Hope. Not just for her career, but for her life, her future, her heart. She had come west to reinvent herself as a professional woman, independent and self-sufficient. She had not expected to find someone who could respect that independence while offering partnership and love. But perhaps that was how the best things happened, she thought. not when you were desperately seeking them, but when you were busy building the life you needed to live, and suddenly discovered that someone wanted to build alongside you rather than in your way. Over the next several months, Rebecca established herself as the most reliable surveyor in the territory. She took on projects ranging from small property disputes to large-scale mapping efforts for the territorial government. She rented a small office in Aurora and hired a clerk to help with paperwork and correspondence. Her reputation spread, and soon she was receiving requests from as far away as Denver and Colorado Springs. And through it all, Russell was there, not interfering with her work but supporting it. He would help her load equipment when she was heading out on a survey. He made sure she had a reliable horse and the supplies she needed for extended field work. When she returned exhausted from days of hiking rough terrain and taking measurements, he would bring her a hot meal and listen to her talk about her work without ever looking bored. They courted in the old-fashioned sense, taking time to truly know each other. Russell showed Rebecca every corner of his ranch, explaining his plans for the future, his hopes for expanding the operation while maintaining the land's health. Rebecca taught Russell to read survey maps and understand legal property descriptions, sharing her passion for precision and accuracy. Caroline became a close friend, offering advice about navigating life in the West and tactfully suggesting that her brother was happier than she had seen him in years. Thomas, though quiet, clearly approved of Rebecca, treating her with respect and easy companionship. They had their first real argument 4 months after the survey concluded. Rebecca had been offered a job surveying a new mining claim in the mountains, work that would take her away for 3 weeks. Russell asked her not to go, worried about her safety in rough country during autumn when early snows could be dangerous. "I am perfectly capable of handling mountain terrain," Rebecca said, her voice tight with frustration. "I have been doing this work for years. I know you are capable. But that does not mean I will not worry about you being alone in the mountains for weeks. So you want me to turn down work because it makes you uncomfortable? Is that what this is about?" "No, that is not what I am saying at all." Russell ran his hand through his hair, clearly struggling to find the right words. "I am saying I love you, Rebecca, and the thought of you in danger scares me. But I also know I have got no right to tell you what work you can or cannot take." Rebecca stopped pacing and stared at him. "What did you say? Which part?" Russell looked confused by her sudden stillness. "The part where you said you love me." Russell's expression softened. "I love you. I have been in love with you for months now, probably since the first day we spent surveying together. I was waiting for the right moment to tell you, though I suppose in the middle of an argument was not it." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. "You are an idiot, Russell Reeves. I am aware. Is that a response to my declaration of love or my timing? Both. Because I love you too, and I have been terrified to say it, and now you have gone and said it in the middle of an argument about me taking a job in the mountains." Rebecca was laughing and crying at the same time. "And I am still taking that job, because it is important work and I already accepted the contract. I know you are, and I will be a nervous wreck the entire time you are gone, but I will deal with it because I respect your career and your choices." Russell crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. "I love you, Rebecca. All of you, including the stubborn, independent part that drives me crazy sometimes. I love you too. All of you, including the overprotective part that I know comes from caring rather than control." Rebecca wrapped her arms around his waist and rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "We will figure this out, how to balance my work and your concerns. It will not always be easy, but it will be worth it." "It already is worth it," Russell said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Rebecca did take the mountain surveying job, and Russell did worry the entire 3 weeks she was gone. But she came back safe and successful, with another glowing recommendation to add to her growing reputation. And when she returned, Russell was waiting for her in Aurora, and the smile on his face when he saw her made the difficult weeks apart worthwhile. As winter settled over Colorado, Rebecca found herself spending more time at the Reeves ranch. It was practical, she told herself. The roads were difficult in winter, and many of her survey jobs were in the area around the ranch anyway. It made sense to stay there rather than riding back and forth to Aurora. But the truth was, she was beginning to think of the ranch as home. She loved the quiet evenings by the fire, the comfortable companionship with Caroline and Thomas, the satisfaction of working alongside Russell when he needed help with ranch tasks. She loved waking up to the sight of the mountains painted pink by sunrise and falling asleep to the sound of wind in the pines. On Christmas Eve, after a simple but joyful celebration with the family, Russell asked Rebecca to walk with him despite the cold. They bundled up in coats and scarves and walked out beyond the barn, where the snow lay pristine and untouched under a brilliant moon. "I have something I want to show you," Russell said, leading her to a slight rise that overlooked the ranch buildings. "Do you remember the first day you were here, when I brought you out to see the creek at sunset?" "Of course I remember. That was the day you told me you had feelings for me, and I was too scared to fully acknowledge my own. A lot has changed since then." Russell pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her from behind so they both looked out at the view together. "Rebecca, this past year with you has been the best of my life. Getting to know you, falling in love with you, building a partnership that respects both of our dreams and ambitions. You make me want to be better, do better, think bigger." Rebecca leaned back against him, feeling safe and content. "You do the same for me. You have taught me that I can have a career and a partnership, that love does not mean sacrificing who I am. I want to spend the rest of my life learning and growing with you. I want to support your work and celebrate your successes. I want to build something lasting with you, not just a ranch but a real home, a family, a future." Russell turned her gently to face him, and in the moonlight she saw he was nervous. "Rebecca Katherine Winters, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my equal in all things?" Rebecca's heart was so full she could barely speak. "Yes, yes, of course yes." Russell pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. "It was my grandmother's ring. She came west with my grandfather in the 40s, helped him build their first homestead in Kansas. She was tough and smart and did not take nonsense from anyone. Caroline always said you reminded me of her, and I think she would have liked you to have this." Rebecca let him slip the ring onto her finger, marveling at how perfectly it fit. "I am honored to wear it. And I promise to live up to your grandmother's example." They kissed under the moonlight, sealing their promise to each other. And as they walked back to the house together, Rebecca felt a deep sense of rightness. This was where she belonged, not because she was giving up her independence or her career, but because she had found someone who enhanced rather than diminished her. They married in early spring of 1877, in a simple ceremony in Aurora, attended by friends, neighbors, and business associates who had come to respect Rebecca's work and Russell's integrity. Caroline cried happy tears and insisted on hosting a celebration dinner at the ranch afterward. Even Owen Patterson attended, bringing a handsome set of surveying stakes as a wedding gift and sheepishly admitting that it was nice to see neighbors happy. After the wedding, Rebecca did not stop working. She continued to take surveying jobs throughout the territory, building an even stronger reputation for accuracy and fairness. But now she returned each time to a home rather than just a place to stay, to a husband who asked about her work with genuine interest and supported her ambitions wholeheartedly. Russell, for his part, found that having Rebecca as his wife made the ranch seem more complete. She brought her precision and problem-solving skills to the operation, helping him plan improvements and expansions with careful attention to sustainability and efficiency. She surveyed the entire ranch property in detail, creating maps that showed water sources, grazing patterns, and potential areas for development. "We should fence the eastern section," Rebecca said one evening, spreading her maps across the kitchen table while Caroline cooked dinner. "The terrain analysis shows it has better grass recovery than the western pastures, but the cattle are overgrazing it because it is more accessible. If we control their access through fencing and rotation, we can improve the overall carrying capacity of the ranch." Russell leaned over her shoulder, studying the maps. "That makes sense. It would mean a significant investment in fencing materials, but the long-term benefit would be worth it. And look here," Rebecca pointed to a section near the northern boundary. "This depression appears to be a seasonal wetland. If we protect it rather than draining it, it could serve as supplemental water during dry years, and it would support wildlife that could be valuable for hunting." Thomas, who had been listening quietly, nodded. "That wetland used to be bigger, before we ran cattle through there constantly. If we fence it off, give it a chance to recover, it could be a real asset." These conversations became a regular feature of their life together. Rebecca brought her analytical skills to the ranch, while Russell's deep knowledge of the land and livestock informed her understanding. They were truly partners, each making the other better. In the winter of 1877, Rebecca realized she was pregnant. The discovery brought a complicated mix of emotions. She was excited about having a child with Russell, but worried about how pregnancy and motherhood would affect her career. She had worked so hard to establish herself professionally, and she feared that having a baby would undermine her credibility or force her to give up the work she loved. Russell found her crying in the guest cabin, now converted to her office, staring at a map she was supposed to be reviewing. "What is wrong?" he asked, immediately concerned. "I am pregnant," Rebecca said, and burst into fresh tears. "And I am happy about it, but I am also terrified because I do not know how to be a mother and a surveyor at the same time. Society already thinks I am strange for doing this work, and now they will expect me to stay home and tend the baby. And I do not know if I can give up my career. But I do not know if I can be a good mother without doing that, and I am just so confused." Russell knelt beside her chair and took her hands gently. "Rebecca, listen to me. You are going to be an excellent mother, just like you are excellent at everything you commit to doing, and you are not giving up your career. We will figure out how to balance things. Caroline has already said she would be happy to help with childcare, and we can hire someone if we need to. We have got options. But what will people say? A mother who leaves her baby to go survey property lines. They will call me unnatural, a bad mother. Let them talk. You have never cared what narrow-minded people think before. Do not start now." Russell's voice was firm. "Our child will have a mother who loves them fiercely and also loves her work, who shows them that women can be anything they have the courage and skill to become. That is a gift, Rebecca, not a failing." Rebecca squeezed his hands, drawing strength from his certainty. "You really believe that? I know it. And in 18 years, when our child is grown, they will be proud to tell people that their mother was the finest surveyor in Colorado territory, and that she never compromised who she was for anyone." The baby was born in late summer of 1878, a healthy boy they named Robert, after Rebecca's father. He had Russell's blue eyes and Rebecca's determined spirit, making his presence known with lusty cries from the moment of his birth. Rebecca discovered that Russell had been right. With Caroline's help and eventually a kind young woman named Sarah whom they hired as a nurse, she was able to continue taking surveying jobs while also being present for her son. She took shorter contracts for the first year, staying closer to home, but gradually worked her way back to her previous level of professional activity. Some people did gossip, of course. There were women in Aurora who whispered that Rebecca was unnatural, a bad mother for not staying home constantly. But there were others, particularly younger women, who looked at Rebecca with something like hope in their eyes, as if her example showed them possibilities they had never dared imagine for themselves. One afternoon, when Robert was nearly 2 years old, Rebecca returned from a 3-day survey to find Russell teaching their son to ride a gentle old mare around the corral. Robert was laughing with pure joy, his small hands gripping the saddle horn, completely fearless. "Mama!" he shouted when he saw her. "Riding, I am riding. I see that, sweetheart. You are doing so well." Rebecca climbed the corral fence to watch, her heart full. Russell guided the mare over to where she sat. "He has been asking about you constantly. I told him you were doing important work, measuring land so people know what belongs to them." "Mama measures?" Robert asked, his little face serious. "That is right. Mama is a surveyor. She makes maps and marks boundaries so everyone knows where their property is. When I am big, I will help Mama measure." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. "When you are big, you can do anything you want. You can be a surveyor like Mama or a rancher like Papa or something completely different. Whatever makes you happy and uses your talents." As she watched her husband and son continue their riding lesson, Rebecca reflected on how much her life had changed since that hot July day when she first rode into Aurora. She had come seeking professional recognition and personal independence. She had found those things, but she had also found so much more: love, partnership, family, and a home. She had learned that strength was not about standing alone, but about choosing carefully who to stand beside. That independence did not mean isolation, and that love, real love, expanded possibilities rather than limiting them. The years passed in a rhythm of work and family, seasons of growth and seasons of rest. Rebecca's reputation continued to grow, and she eventually published a manual on proper surveying techniques that became a standard reference in the territory. Russell expanded the ranch, always with an eye toward sustainability and long-term planning, often implementing suggestions from Rebecca's detailed land analyses. They had 2 more children, a daughter named Sarah in 1880 and another son, James, in 1883. Caroline and Thomas eventually built their own house on ranch land, and their children grew up alongside Russell and Rebecca's, forming a close-knit extended family. Robert showed an early aptitude for mathematics, and by age 10 was helping his mother with calculations on her surveying projects. Sarah loved animals and spent every moment she could in the barn with her father, learning about livestock and range management. James was still too young to show clear interests, but he was curious about everything, asking endless questions that both parents delighted in answering. One evening in the spring of 1885, Rebecca and Russell sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. The children were inside with Caroline, their laughter drifting through the open windows. Robert was teaching his younger siblings a card game, and from the sounds of it, Sarah was winning. "Do you ever regret it?" Rebecca asked softly. "Marrying a woman who could not be content just being a ranch wife?" Russell pulled her close, his arm around her shoulders. "Not for a single moment. You have made my life richer in every way. This ranch is more successful because of your input. Our children are growing up with broader horizons because of your example. And I am a better man because you challenge me to think differently. I used to think I had to choose between career and love, Rebecca admitted. That having both was impossible, that I would have to sacrifice one to have the other. But you showed me that the right partnership makes both better. We showed each other that, Russell corrected gently. You taught me that loving someone does not mean constraining them, that real partnership means supporting each other's dreams even when they are unconventional. Rebecca thought back to that first survey, to the day Russell had asked her to mark the boundaries of their ranch as husband and wife, though at the time he had been speaking hypothetically, expressing a hope rather than a reality. Now, years later, those boundaries were indeed marked, not just on maps and legal documents but in the life they had built together. Mark the boundary of our ranch as husband and wife, Rebecca said softly, remembering. You said that to me once, do you remember? During the survey. Russell smiled. I remember. I think I knew even then that I wanted to spend my life with you, building something that was ours together. And we did. We marked those boundaries, and everything within them made this place ours in every sense. Rebecca looked out at the ranch, at the fenced pastures and tidy outbuildings, the corrals and garden and the creek running through the valley. This is what we built together, not just a successful ranch but a life that honors both of our truths. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the land they loved settle into night. Inside, their children's voices rose in laughter, and somewhere in the distance a coyote called. The spring wind carried the scent of new grass and possibility. Rebecca thought about the young widow who had stepped off a wagon in Aurora 9 years ago, armed with surveying equipment and determination, convinced that her future lay in solitary work and professional achievement. That woman could never have imagined this. A husband who loved and respected her completely, children who were growing up believing they could be anything, a career that flourished alongside rather than in spite of her family life. She had come west to mark boundaries, to bring clarity and precision to disputed land. Instead, she had found that the most important boundaries were the ones she drew around her own life, the definitions she created for herself about what was possible, what was acceptable, what was worth fighting for. And within those boundaries, carefully marked and legally binding, she had built something that no survey could measure. A love as wide as the Colorado sky, as enduring as the mountains, as true as her theodolite readings. A partnership that proved that two strong people could stand side by side, each whole and complete, and create something together that was greater than either could achieve alone. I love you, she said to Russell, the words as true and precise as any measurement she had ever taken. I love you too, he replied, and kissed her as the first stars blazed to life above them. For all my days, Rebecca, for all my days. They grew old together on that ranch, Russell's dark hair turning silver while Rebecca's gray eyes remained as sharp and clear as ever. They watched their children grow and build their own lives. Robert became a civil engineer, using his mathematical skills to design bridges and irrigation systems throughout the growing state. Sarah married a neighboring rancher and ran the most successful horse breeding operation in 3 counties, her understanding of livestock genetics ahead of her time. James surprised everyone by becoming a lawyer, specializing in property and water rights cases, always crediting his mother's surveying work for teaching him the importance of clear boundaries and precise documentation. They saw Colorado Territory become the state of Colorado in 1876, witnessed the silver booms and busts, the arrival of more railroads and the transformation of Aurora from a rough frontier town into a settled community. Through all the changes, the ranch remained, a testament to careful stewardship and partnership. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1902, their children arranged a celebration at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from miles around, many of them people whose property disputes Rebecca had resolved over the years. There were speeches and toasts, stories and laughter. Owen Patterson, now in his 70s and still working his ranch with the help of his sons, stood to speak. When Miss Winters, as she was then, came to survey the boundary between my land and Reeves, I will admit I was skeptical. A woman surveyor seemed like a newfangled notion that would not amount to much, but she showed me that skill and integrity matter more than what society expects. She found the truth, even when it was not what either of us wanted to hear, and in doing so she saved Russell and me from years of pointless conflict. More than that, she set an example that has inspired my own daughters to pursue their ambitions without apology. Rebecca Reeves is proof that the West is indeed a place where people can become who they truly are if they have the courage and the skill. The applause was genuine and warm. Rebecca stood to respond, Russell's hand in hers. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate with us." When I came west in 1876, I was running from grief and seeking purpose. I found both and so much more. I found a place where my work was valued, where my skills could make a real difference. But most importantly, I found a partner who understood that love is not about limiting someone, but about helping them become their fullest self. She looked at Russell, her eyes bright with love. "This ranch, this life, everything we have built together, it all started with marking a boundary. But within that boundary, we created space for both of us to flourish, to grow, to become more than we could have been alone. That is the real survey work of marriage, measuring carefully, marking clearly, and then cultivating everything within those boundaries with care and respect." Russell stood beside her, his arm around her waist. "You know, folks often ask me what it is like being married to a woman with a career, a woman who does not fit the traditional mold. And I always tell them the same thing: it is the best decision I ever made. Rebecca has not only been my wife and the mother of our children, but my advisor, my partner in every sense, the person who makes me think harder and do better. We built this ranch together, not just the physical structures but the principles it stands on: integrity, sustainability, respect for the land and for each other. That is the legacy I want to leave, and I could not have created it without her." The party continued late into the night, but eventually the guests departed, and the family settled into comfortable quiet. Their children had gone to their own homes, promising to return for breakfast. Russell and Rebecca walked out to their favorite spot overlooking the ranch, the same place where he had proposed all those years ago. The land spread before them in the moonlight, familiar and beloved. Fences marked boundaries clearly, cattle grazed peacefully, and the creek that had once been so fiercely disputed ran freely through both the Reeves and Patterson properties, providing life to both ranches as it had always been meant to do. "Do you remember that first day?" Russell asked. "When you told me you were going to mark the boundary accurately, no matter whose interests it affected?" "I remember. I was trying so hard to maintain professional distance, to not let my growing feelings for you influence my work. And you succeeded. The survey was fair and accurate, and it solved a problem that had been festering for years." Russell pulled her close. "But more than that, you taught me something important that day. You showed me that integrity is not negotiable, that truth matters more than convenience, and that the right answer is worth finding even when it is difficult. Those lessons have guided everything we have built here." Rebecca rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady strength of him, unchanged despite the years. "We built something good here, Russell. Not perfect, but good and true and lasting. We did. And we did it together, respecting each other's strengths and supporting each other's dreams. That is what I am most proud of, more than the ranch's success, or the land we have conserved, or any of it. I am proud that we created a partnership that honored both of us fully." They stood together in the moonlight, two people who had found each other against the odds and built a life that defied expectations. A surveyor and a cowboy, marking boundaries and cultivating everything within them, proving that love and work, independence and partnership, individual strength and united purpose could all exist together in beautiful, lasting harmony. In the years that followed, they continued their work with the same dedication and partnership that had always defined their relationship. When Russell's health began to fail in his 70s, Rebecca was there, caring for him with the same precision and devotion she brought to everything. And when she could not survey any longer herself, she trained younger surveyors, passing on her knowledge and her insistence on accuracy and integrity. They lived to see their grandchildren grow, to watch the ranch continue under Sarah's capable management, to witness Robert's engineering projects transform the state, to read James's landmark legal decisions establishing clearer property rights. The life they had built together extended beyond themselves, influencing the next generation and the one after that. Russell passed away peacefully in 1915, at the age of 79, surrounded by family in the house he had built and expanded over the decades. Rebecca held his hand as he took his final breaths, and his last words were, "I love you, my brilliant surveyor. Thank you for marking the boundaries of my heart and making a home within them." Rebecca lived another 5 years, remaining sharp and active almost to the end. She continued to consult on complex surveying cases, maintained detailed maps of the ranch, and wrote long letters to her grandchildren full of wisdom and encouragement. When she died in 1920 at the age of 68, her funeral was attended by surveyors, ranchers, lawyers, and business people from across the state, all of whom had been touched by her work, her integrity, or her example. She was buried beside Russell on a hill overlooking the ranch, their graves marked with simple stones that bore their names and the dates of their lives. But their real monument was the land itself, the well-managed ranch that continued to thrive under family stewardship, the clear property boundaries that prevented disputes, the conservation practices that kept the land healthy and productive. And in the hearts of those who had known them, they lived on as an example of what was possible when two people committed to honoring each other's truth, when partnership meant supporting rather than constraining, when love was measured not in possession but in mutual flourishing. The surveyor and the cowboy, marking boundaries and building a life within them, proving that the West was indeed a place where anyone could become who they truly were, if they had the courage to measure carefully and the wisdom to respect what they found.